Signal has a number of sampling modes available. In this tutorial, we'll look at setting Signal up to sample data in sweeps with a fixed interval. The General tab of the sampling configuration sets the basic information used for sampling, such as the sample rate, frame length, and channels to record. The sample rate is used for all waveform channels which are defined in the ADC ports field. The Sweep Mode drop-down defines the mode of sampling. In fixed interval sampling mode, sweeps are internally timed so that they occur at the specified interval. A random variation in this interval can optionally be provided. The settings for sweep interval and any required random variation are set using the pulses configuration dialog that is used to define pulse outputs for use during sampling. Because these values can vary with the state in multiple state sampling, they are set in the pulse outputs dialog for convenience. For more information on using multiple states, see the Introduction to Multiple States Sampling tutorial. When using fixed interval mode, the pulse outputs can be any length greater than or equal to the sampling sweep, and the sampling sweep starts at a defined point within the pulse outputs. The output's length and sweep time parameters are shown when the control track is selected. The outputs parameter, labelled frame prior to version 6.01, sets the length of the outputs frame, not the length of the sampled frame, and must be at least as long as the sampling sweep. The trigger parameter sets the time relative to the start of the pulse outputs of the start of the sampling sweep. This setting must be low enough so that the output's length is no less than the sweep length. The sampling sweep is shown as the thicker blue line within the outputs frame. The interval between the start of one outputs frame and the start of the next is defined by the interval and vary fields. These set the timed interval between output frames, which cannot be less than the pulse output frame length, and the percentage random variation in the interval from 0 to 100. If you don't need pulse outputs occurring outside the sampled sweep, you should set trigger to 0 and outputs to match the frame length setting in the General tab, and then set your interval and optional variation of choice. The interval, with any variation, should be greater than the output's length by at least 100 milliseconds to give Signal enough time to set up the next sweep. Fast fixed interval sweep mode can be used if you need intervals of less than 100 milliseconds, but does not support any variation settings or the use of multiple states. These settings give an output frame and sample sweep of 1 second, with a 5-second interval between the start of one sweep and the start of the next. I hope that you have found this introduction to fixed interval sampling useful.